Statistics South Africa has denied claims that the data it released on the 2022 census is misleading. StatsSA's response comes after the University of Cape Town's Centre for Actuarial Research labelled some of the data on the 2022 census as implausible and incoherent. This while StatsSA announced that South Africa's population reached 62 million in 2022. The Centre for Actuarial Research says the census contains inconsistencies in the age structure of the population. In a statement, StatsSA says it's dedicated to upholding standards of data accuracy and that it had used the post-enumeration survey as a quality control to detect and rectify any errors. StatsSA also says it firmly denies the Centre's claim that Census 2022 figures should be treated as estimates due to undercounting issues. Well, let's speak now to Professor of Demography at the University of Cape Town, and that's Tom Moultrie. Prof, a very good morning to you. Thanks very much for your time. Just how serious are these discrepancies that have been identified here? And if you could please help us understand them in a lay person's language. How serious are they and why?
Thank you very much, and thanks for the time. The discrepancies are material, and when one looks at either small areas, for example, municipalities or district councils, or small populations, there's the discrepancies between what was observed in the 2011 census and what is observed now, how it ties in with what we know about patterns of births and deaths and migration in the country. None of those make sense at small areas. To give you an example, the Richtersveld in the Northern Cape, it's a very small local municipality, is reported by StatsSA to have doubled in its population size between 2011 and 2022. Another local municipality, Beaufort West in the Western Cape, has increased its population by nearly 50% between those two censuses. And when you look at Beaufort West, for example, on Google Maps or Google Earth, you can't find evidence of increased number of buildings, houses, which would justify the claim that those populations have increased that much. And this matters because the municipal area estimates are where the rubber hits the road when it comes to service delivery and improving the lives of all South Africans. It's where decisions are made about where to build clinics, schools, roads, houses. And so our concern is that as you dig further and further into the data, it becomes less and less coherent. What we see is that after it was revealed by StatsSA when they released the census that there was a 31% undercount, which is a world record for an undercount in a census of censuses reported to the United Nations. And so the adjustment made to get from what they counted of roughly 42 million to the final headline figure they released of 62 million does in fact make the results of the census an estimate. It's not a count. They did not count 62 million people. They counted 42 million people and then adjusted for that undercount. And because of the extent of the undercount, the processes which they follow, and they're well identified, we all understand them as demographers, what those processes are to correct for the undercount. The size of that post-enumeration survey, which you referred to in your introduction, was simply not adequate to cope with the scale of the undercount which StatsSA confronted at the time of the census.
Let me take the two issues that you've raised. You're saying that when you look at Google Map, you won't see I can't remember how you put it, the difference that there is supposed to be in a place where the number of people is supposed to have, say, doubled. Now, I grew up in a township that hasn't changed physically. There's been no change. But I can't put a number to it, but there are more people in that township today than there have ever been. It's been growing over the years. But I don't know if Google Map is going to show me that.
Well, I mean, if you look at Beaufort West, for example. I mean, Beaufort West is a very interesting example because Beaufort West town accounts for almost half of the population of the entire district municipality of the Central Karoo. And you can look at Google Earth, a satellite image of Beaufort West town in 2010, and you can see down to the level of each individual house, each individual tin Blikkiesdorp or RDP house in the greater area of Beaufort West. And you can then look at that same image from Google Earth or a satellite image of Beaufort West in 2022, and you can identify exactly how many houses are new in the town. And we know that even at 3 or 4 people per household, and those household structures are very small, you simply cannot get a 25,000 person increase in the population of Beaufort West. It is logically impossible.
And I was citing like the example I just gave because whenever I go back there, I mean, one of the schools I went to is still there, but there are no. It's not in use because some people have gone, have left the place, or the Department of Education has declared that it can't continue to operate because it's got much lower numbers. The point I'm making is that the structures are there, same structures are there, everything the same number of houses, but we know for a fact that there has been a change in how. But coming to the issue of estimates versus counting. I mean, in my life, I think I've only once have I ever been visited by census people, but those numbers were never really questioned. Everyone accepted them as estimates. Or is there something I'm missing?
No, you've said it exactly right. You accepted it as an estimate. We say, and we have always said, in 2011, the undercount of the census in the census was 14%. In 2001, it was 17%. And because one is adjusting for the people who are not counted, you cannot say that those people were actually counted, and therefore it is not a count of the population. It is an estimate.
So what then would you say are the implications for all of us, if indeed what you have discovered is true?
So, I mean, the first thing is that StatsSA's response has been to say basically that they followed the recipe. They checked all the check boxes, therefore the data are fit for purpose. They have not responded at any level with the substantive queries which we have identified in a 20,000-word report which we released. What the issues are is that it makes a difference for service delivery and for the lives and well-being and for plans and policies which are aimed to improve the lives of all South Africans, whether it is child vaccination rates. It's all very well for the Department of Health, for example, to say they've administered so many million measles vaccines. The Department of Basic Education can say how many children they have enrolled in schools. But if the census is saying that there are more children in that area which the Department of Basic Education doesn't find in their data, well, that means either there are children who should be in school who are not, and that is a social and economic crisis for the country, or otherwise it points to the fact that the estimates in the census are wrong. And so, and if you are both the municipality of Beaufort West or Richtersveld, should you be planning, in the case of Richtersveld, for a population of 17,000 or a population of 8,000? And that makes a huge difference if you are a municipal manager or trying to deliver services in those areas. So this should be a major concern for all South Africans.
Now, I mean, as you would can imagine, Prof, I mean, a great majority of us don't have a clue. I mean, we don't know what all of this entails. But as people who will obviously be affected by the issues of service delivery, or whether it's child vaccination, and all of us. What recourse do we have? Because the last thing we would be interested in is a ping-pong game between StatsSA and academics who believe they do the wrong thing, especially on the back of what you highlighted in your last response, which is that the response of StatsSA leaves much to be desired. What should we do? What recourse do we have as South Africans who will obviously be affected by anything amiss in the statistics that the government is going to place its delivery and planning on?
Yeah, so the first issue is that the census was conducted 2.5 years ago. The post-enumeration survey was conducted 2 years ago. That ship has now sailed. We can't go back and rerun a census. A census is an incredibly complex, incredibly expensive exercise. The last one cost 3.2 billion rand. A census is regarded as the most complex and difficult peacetime undertaking of a national government. We can't go and just do another census. So we have to accept that census has been done. And the question is, where do we go from here? And our recommendations are twofold. Firstly, is that until we understand fully what is in the data and how the results, it came to be what they were when they were released, that StatsSA should not be using the results of the 2022 census in their annual series of national population estimates. They'll be releasing those in about 2 weeks' time. And our strong recommendation is that they don't try and drive that annual series of population estimates through the census data until we understand what has happened. The second aspect is that we think that it's necessary to use the data from 2011 and our very deep understanding of births and deaths in the country, as well as to a lesser extent migration, to come up with an alternative set of district, at least, level estimates of the population, which might more accurately and realistically reflect the size and the scale and the scope and the distribution of the South African population. And the final step is to say the next census is going to be done in 2031. We need a process now, beginning now, and it's not too soon to start planning, to say how do we actually ensure that the next census in 2031 really is a census which justifies the confidence of all South Africans.
Would you say there was no, I was going through your document, would you say that the planning was inadequate?
I think I have a huge degree of sympathy for StatsSA. They were trying to run a census in the middle of a pandemic. Had they consulted with demographers, certainly myself and my colleagues would have suggested this was not a good time to run a census. I think they really did try and do as good a job as they could under the circumstances. The SG was on another channel yesterday talking about the fact that in 2 provinces they encountered floods, they encountered violence, they had a number of operational difficulties. We also know in the Western Cape that they endlessly extended the primary data collection, which was supposed to be done by the end of February 2022, and they only finished trying to enumerate the population of the Western Cape at the end of May 2022. So clearly they had difficulties. The bigger question, which we raise in the report, is what role did National Treasury play in forcing StatsSA to conduct the census when they might not necessarily have been ready to do so, by virtue of the fact that it would appear that the National Treasury did not agree to a request from StatsSA to roll over some of the census budget into the next financial year.
So you are giving them some slack, and money may have had something to do with it.
Yeah, we have, myself and my colleagues have worked with StatsSA on every post-apartheid census since 1996. Sometimes we've been inside the room, sometimes we've been outside the room.
Okay.
We are demographers. We understand how complicated a census is. We have worked extensively with them. When they say that they followed the recipe, when they followed the check boxes, we don't disagree. What we are saying is that what they were able to collect, and the fact that the undercount is so extreme, really does call into question some of the results do not make sense at a national level. As a very simple example, in a very small population, the population of designated or self-declared Indian, Asian, South Africans in 2011 was 1.3 million. Based on the numbers now released, it would imply there have been 300,000 Indian immigrants. It's nearly 25% of the population over the last decade. And we don't think that that stands up to scrutiny.